Wonderful services. I'm a Roma, so apologies. I'm a little bit intimidated. Normally as I travel around the region and speak, no one can understand anything I say with my accent. This is the first time I've been in front of 100 Kiwis for a while, so I guess I have to pay attention and try and say sensible things. I've been with Google for about 8 years. My jobs at Google have been quite different over that time, but essentially I've been out traveling around Asia Pacific and trying to start parts of our business around the region. In that role, I am a shameless consumer of networks. When I started, I was employee number 1 in the division that I work in. I used anyone and everyone that I could in any connection I had in New Zealand to find people in the region that I could trust to go out and work. And so when the guys told me about Kia and the network, it just immediately struck a chord with me. I think New Zealanders naturally are scrappy and they naturally make use of communities, but we do have a bad habit of probably hiding our light under a bushel to some extent. And I think the objective that Trade and Enterprise and Kia have, which is to connect you all, to get those million expat Kiwis all talking to each other, talking about innovation, talking about how to do business overseas, I think that's just terrific. And everyone in the room understood that, which is the first time in Asia. So, and I think too what's really important is everywhere I go, I meet amazing New Zealand firms, amazing New Zealand entrepreneurs that are trying to create the next big thing. And the single biggest problem I hear right after funding, I couldn't agree more with Matthew. I love listening to people's great ideas. Money's not the problem. The problem's getting out of New Zealand. The problem is taking an idea that's really world class and selling it to the rest of the world and being able to take it out there. And the only way to do that is with folks like you. You don't do that by actually going and knocking on the door and finding the first 1,000 customers. You do it by being able to connect your network, by being able to use organizations like this to make connections all around the world and to grow and scale. So look, with that in mind, welcome again to Google. We're delighted as a company to have this partnership with Kia and to have you involved. I thought it would just maybe be interesting for 15 or 20 minutes to share with you the way we think about innovation. There's a really good cross-section. I saw the list of where everyone's from tonight. There's a really interesting cross-section of both really big corporates, very, very senior people, right down to, single-person startups. And so I actually think innovation as a philosophy, though, I think thinking about the way the world's going to change, Google has a pretty unique perspective on that. We're a technology company first and foremost, but I also think we're an interesting disruptor in terms of business models and the way we think about what a change might happen today in technology, what that'll mean to the economy and to our business and to our shareholders over time. So eventually, hopefully, some slides will turn up and I'll give you some pictures to ride along with. But in the meantime, let me tell you about a couple of things. I think there are 3 or 4 technologies, and we are a technology firm, so apologies to the non-technologists. I think at the macro level, there are 3 or 4 technologies that are absolutely changing the world right now. And not all of us can be like Matthew and kind of be looking out beyond into the future in terms of the next incredible new thing. But what I do find when I talk to all of my customers, there are some inescapable truths about technology right now, things that are happening around you, and most people haven't thought about them. Most people aren't taking full advantage of those. So if you click through things, Richard, that's great. Perfect segue. I think we're lucky, we're in ANZ. Most people know who Google is. I have to spend a bit more time on this in China, but in Australia, many of you will be familiar with these products. In Google, what we tend to think about first is, can it be a billion user experience? And if you just stop and think about that in terms of a mindset from our founders, Google, we'll talk a little bit more about how you get there. You don't just wake up in the morning with a billion user product or a billion user idea. But that's the test of everything we do. Can it be a billion people? Can it be a billion devices? A billion is the new million inside our organization. And the reason I say that's important is we relentlessly cancel and kill ideas that aren't. So you can have the most profitable idea in the world and take it to Larry and Sergey, and they'll apply the billion test. So these are all examples of products that have become billion user products. They're all best of breed in terms of their adoption. But they start from an idea that we passionately believed would be truly scalable across the globe. And hopefully what I'll do over the next 15 minutes is let you understand how we think about that, the process we use to test and to think about how you create a billion user idea. So if you skip through. A couple of things, I won't spend too much time on this if you just keep rolling through. The first thing is, let's talk about mobile. This is something I'm really passionate about, and Google as a company is passionate about. People aren't spending enough time on. I hear a lot of people talking about their mobile strategy. In Google, we think it's actually mobile only. It's not mobile first. It's definitely not, let me get some stores, let me get a website, let me think about having a mobile app. Increasingly, if you just look at all of these numbers and the proliferation of mobile devices, of smartphones, we think that just about all commerce will end up being in a mobile context. The business I run today is mapping, so I look after all of our maps around Asia Pacific and Japan and China. And you know, everybody engages through a mobile phone, everybody is location aware. And if your business, no matter what it is, whether it's building houses or selling apps, if your business doesn't have a plan around mobile and how to lead with mobile, then you'll be left behind. So that's one of our inescapable truths at the moment that we think about. They do change every year in Google, so don't quote me on that next year. If you're all on to the next one. You know, I think beyond that, and this is, you know, the Matthews inside Google are trying to think too, you know, mobile's actually pretty uncomfortable. You know, I had to put my phone down because it's hot. It's been sitting there receiving emails for the last hour. It's small. You know, it has a light that goes off. Someone might call me. It's going to be distracting. It's not a particularly intuitive, user-friendly experience. So we think there's a whole new paradigm for user experience. And Matthew alluded to it. We're playing with Google Glass. We're investing really heavily into wearables. It's early days. It's clunky. I don't know if anybody had a Motorola phone in '83. But, you know, this is where wearables is now. But in 10 years' time, it'll just be easy. You know, if there's one thing we believe in Google is if you think about the user, think about what works for people, for the end user, eventually you'll figure out the right answer. And that's how we think about wearables right now. You know, glass, and I'm sorry, Matthew, I don't have one here right now. But, I can tell I'm not going to get off the hook, so I will organise one. Glass is not really, you know, wide-scale distribution yet. It's not really ready for prime time. But the second you put it on, it's such a different experience. I had a chance to play with it, and so I won't play the video, but you know, just having something where your hands are free, think about the impact for all the businesses that you're in. Think about the impact on a mining site or in a medical theatre. Think about the impact in a theatre of war, which we're trying not to at Google. We're desperately trying to keep that technology in consumer land. I think another point I wanted to make is that innovation happens everywhere. I'm a proud, passionate Kiwi and North Islander, so I didn't shed too many tears when we lost the final. That's just great. This is bi-directional brain drain from the South Island, right? So, look, I think the point I wanted to make is we have an unbelievably cool R&D project that we ran in New Zealand. If you didn't hear about it, Project Lunas, we sent balloons up to distribute satellite internet signals. You know, the vision wasn't really for New Zealand. I think we get a few jibes. There's quite a few Kiwi Googlers in the room. So, but the idea was there are large parts of the world that aren't well serviced by today's model. They're not well serviced by cable and network providers. If you go to Africa and big chunks of emerging markets across Asia and in China in particular, you know, we want the whole world to be connected. You know, that's clear why Google would want that to happen, but we think it's better for the world as well. We think that, you know, the internet and digital connectivity brings benefits, but people can't get it. So we're trying this kind of stuff. We tried it in New Zealand. You know, this is where we first tried this technology. We're not doing it because we necessarily think that balloons, you know, creating network connectivity is the right answer. We're doing it because we think there are billions of people that don't have a connection to the internet, and we need to fix it. And we should try some crazy ideas. And I'm going to talk a little bit later on how we distinguish between our great ideas and our crazy ideas and the science that Google applies to that. So, and then finally, I think looking around the room, it's a reasonably mature group. Is that the politically correct way to say that? I mean, you people are not the user of the future. You know, everybody's sitting here politely, not looking at their phone, nobody's tapping away, nobody's posting at me. I'm not seeing Instagram abuse coming through on my phone. You know, this is the generation that we're having to deal with as business folks. And so whether you're an entrepreneur, a CEO, or you're running an established or a new business, you know, these guys don't behave like you. These guys are freakish. You know, my 10 and 12-year-old, you know, daughters are on there tonight saying all sorts of crap about me out on the internet. And, you know, we've got to get our head around that, and we'll talk a little bit about how we in Google are trying to think about the way innovation relates to the end user, trying to understand them first. So back to that point, understand these guys, and you'll understand what your next business model is. You know, don't try and force your business model onto this generation of user. I'll keep chugging through. If you go to the next one, thanks, Richard. And increasingly what you'll find is it's not just glass and the phone, everything is going to be connected. So increasingly, my world in particular in Google, we built maps, they were amazing, they're great, we did that 10 years ago. Increasingly we just think about location because everything knows where everything else is. It's getting to the point where this technology is not new, but it's getting to the point where just about every connected thing in the house you're going to know about. There's some really cool stuff you can do with that. Again, Google likes to think about really big ideas. Our founder has said, why wouldn't I be able to learn something from where you move in relation to other things to improve your quality of life, to improve your health? And so, the example that he gives is, I should know by the number of times you go to the bathroom or where you move in the building as to whether you're getting more or less healthy. And you can imagine the reaction. But his point is, there is this massive insight that's going to be built through technology based on location and the Internet of Things. It's going to be tough. It's going to be just like the debates we have in Google around privacy and trust to get that right. But it's inescapable again. Things will be connected. We will learn more. There will be more data. And we all have to figure out what to do with that. So, and I'll keep skipping through, Richard, just in the interest of times. Look, I just want to make one point. This is one of my favorite case studies that I talk to customers about. If you go to the next slide, I don't know if everybody's familiar with Standard & Poor's. It's just an economic index in the US that measures the top 500 companies, or 501 since Google split their stock, which is kind of ironic. What Standard & Poor's, the purpose of this slide, I talked to lots of boards around the region, is saying, in 1957, it took you 75 years to qualify to be in their top 500 companies. You can argue about whether the criteria are right, about whether it's too US-centric or whether it's too weighted towards traditional industry, but it took a long time. You needed a truckload of capital, you needed time, you needed resources, you needed people. In 2003, it took 25 years. I mean, that's better. Okay, maybe if you're IBM, you can chase down Microsoft, right? The other way. 2013, it took 10 years. And whenever my customers say to me, who does Google think about as a competitor? We say, that line's only going one way, right? The time to market and the impact of all those technology trends I talk about is you don't know who your next big competitor is, right? So it's not going to be like for Matthew where you knew it was Drake and the other 10 vampires. It's going to be some kids in a garage with an amazing new business model, a different way to make it fast and beautiful for the user, and they will disrupt and create something in 2 or 3 years. So an example, and I always get in trouble, so please, I hope this part of the filming doesn't go out. I always get the name wrong. This company is very particular about how you pronounce them. I call it Ouya, but it's wrong, so I apologize. These guys are a gaming company who started on Kickstarter. So I don't know if people know Kickstarter. This is like a sort of a crowd-funded funding model where instead of giving people capital for equity, you give them capital for stuff. So you say, I'll give you some money and I'll get the first one that you make. Or I'll give you some money and you go create an amazing product or piece of art or film. And so these kids went out and said, we're going to build a gaming console. Because right now it's unfair. Gaming consoles are only built by huge technology companies that have billions of dollars of R&D capital to start with. And they sort of sat around and said, how much money should we raise? And I said, maybe we'll try and raise $1 million. And Kickstarter, the way it works is you've got to be quite careful to make sure you don't, you choose when to stop taking the money. And so these guys thought, what would happen if we raised $1 million? And in the first day, they raised $1 million in 8 hours. And then I've heard these guys talking about it. It's fantastic. They said after 30 days, they were so excited about what happened in the first 8 hours, they didn't notice that they'd raised $8.5 million and they had to stop their campaign because they couldn't conceive of how they would spend $8.5 million. But true to form, they built this device. They sent it out. The users loved it. And it's an open source platform. It does lots of cool technology stuff. They're getting a huge following. What's really interesting is if you talk to Sony and Nintendo, two of my biggest customers, and you go talk to the R&D teams at Sony about these guys, you won't get a good response. Trillions of dollars spent on R&D, process, governance, investment, people. 3 kids in a garage took 30% of our market share. And so that's what we think about in Google. We tend to think about, who's the next company that's just going to come out with a different model? Who's the next company that's going to ride the next user trend to disrupt? If you go on. So look, it sounds interesting. One of the things, just keep rolling forward. Thanks, Richard. One of the things that I always struggled when I first arrived at Google sort of 8 or 9 years ago was I thought, who are those people? Who are the magic people that find these great ideas? And what I've learned over the years is that Google actually has quite a science to trying to identify this innovation. So, like any company, Google has a very, very structured process that's probably different to most companies, and we thought we'd just share with you some of the principles of the way we go about trying to innovate in our company. So if you go to the first one, just onto the next slide. If you go to the first one, the number one asset that Google has is its people. So in fact, the number one asset that Google has is its engineers. We build beautiful, fast, incredible products. People like me from the kind of sales and marketing commercial world, we don't count. We're second-class citizens in Google. We kind of have a say, but not really. But when we hire, we are trying to hire people. One really important point is hire people that can do lots of different things. So something that I eternally struggle with in Google is, you're trying to hire really smart, brilliant people who probably won't be doing the same job in a year's time. Our business changes so fast, and to that point, we think most businesses are going to be disrupted by technology over the next kind of 10, 20, 30 years. That when I hire a person, I can't say to them with any certainty, you'll still be in charge of this division, running this sales, running this P&L in 12 or 18 months' time. So as a general rule, we just look for people with amazing attributes and good skills who are smart, who could do lots of different things. And I think that's very different when I talk to some of my customers. We don't hire a CFO who has the CFO profile. We hire a CFO who tomorrow might be leading a new business that has billions of dollars in revenue, or who might be asked to go down and run an engineering team, or go start a region or start a country. I think, if you roll to the next one, Rich, I think something Google has as a culture to try and drive some of this innovation is we religiously share everything. So to the point actually of driving incredible debate, one of the Google management philosophies is just to tell people as much as you can. Just be as open, as transparent as you can. Respect that your staff will use that sensibly, and we enforce that. If people share information outside the company, we're the first people to let them go. But I'll give you a great example. I was telling some of you earlier on a tour here, is that every quarter after our quarterly board meeting, our chairman does a 1-hour discussion where he basically walks through the meeting from beginning to end. And barring any insider trading or regulatory constraints, he will tell us everything that was said in the meeting, but also what was the debate, who debated it and why they thought the decision was right or wrong, whether the board was split or agreed. And it's very counter to that traditional kind of top-down, single vision, just make sure the message is right. In Google, we're all about let people know why we disagree, let's hear everybody's view, and let's spark the debate. This is something from a technology perspective. We just passionately believe that you're better to be real time. And I'll talk a little bit around that. That comes to the way we think about product. It's just keep going. Iterate fast and fail fast. Whether it's technology and about the technology being available right away, but also in the way that you think about innovation. Don't plan for 18 months to build the next release. The days of naming software after the year in which you aspire to deliver them, they're gone, right? It's not the way the world works nowadays. Get something out, launch it, figure out if it works. If it doesn't work, cancel it. I think the biggest lesson for me in a relatively short time at Google is reward failure. But reward failure where it's been thought through. Reward failure where someone had a plan, they measured it, they had data, they recognized they were failing and they went on to do the next thing. Don't reward people that repeat the same failure all the time. So this one, I think, absolutely in Google, this particularly probably more for the engineering organization. There's a bunch of Kiwi Googlers in the room. We'll maybe get them to say hello at the end of the night and you can talk to them. But we really believe that the best innovation normally doesn't actually come from the people thinking about the problem. If you go and ask the guy that's building Google Glass, what's the biggest problem with the product, he's absolutely focused and thinking about it every single day of the year, but he may not have the best idea. So we believe that innovation comes from everyone, from our users, from everyone in the firm. And we have a whole process that we have to do that. So, we are constantly petitioning and canvassing our engineering community. Salespeople have some good ideas too, but not that often. But we're always asking the organization, what do you think? What's the idea? And we measure it. Google's relentlessly data-driven. So something that intrigued me about the way we measure innovation is, we measure not only what's the best idea, that's kind of the old management culture, we measure what's the most contentious idea. So oftentimes an idea that everyone in the firm disagrees with If everyone argues about it enough, we'll decide we should do something about that. Even if everyone thinks it's a stink idea, it's like, if you're all talking about it for the last 2 weeks, we should know more about that. We should validate that or explore it or try something. So we measure a thing called buzz, and we measure the level of discussion, and then we sort of vote on the ideas. And so these ideas don't just pop up. They're kind of carefully measured, constructed, weighed, based on this culture of allowing people to kind of disagree. So this is, I think, something I now spend a lot of time with my customers talking about, is you have to create space for innovation. You actually have to take it seriously. It's not a workshop once a year. It's not a pull the management team together for a half-day offsite. You have to think about the times where people will actually have available to grow and nurture those ideas they have to do something new. And so one of the things we do with our engineers is we give them 1 day a week where they can go work on something that's not their day job. And it's structured. They can't just work on anything. But it is something they have to be passionate about. It's something they choose. And so the idea is that we get the best innovation about the things that people love to do. And so this 20% time, great examples are Gmail. Actually, is now the world's most popular mail platform. Gmail was a 20% project. I mean, brilliant story. An engineer was like, I'm sick, I can't find anything in my email. It's like, what a great idea. What if you had like a really good search tool on your email? And a few weeks later, he was like, yeah, we're Google. We know something about search. And so he built a search tool. And then like a year later, someone in sales said, it would be awesome if you could send a mail from your email instead of just searching on it. I said, yeah, that's a good idea too, maybe. Maybe we want more than just search. And so that product has just evolved through the different parts of Google over time from someone a day a week just working on that initial problem, that initial idea. To the point I made before, I think, and I say that with all the respect in the world for actually I hope this isn't being filmed, with all the respect in the world for Sergey's glasswork, it's early. It's the first iteration. If you think back to the very first G1 phone, anyone have one of the first Android phones? Dreadful thing, clunky, pull it out, difficult to work. To now, by far the world's most popular, fastest growing mobile platform. Beautiful phones being made by thousands of producers all around the world because get it out, iterate, fail, move on. And then down the end here is, and you'll see this, we've created this whole division called Google X to say, how do you just go work on the crazy stuff? You're not quite sure where it fits. You're not quite sure if it'll ever make money, but you should be working on it. And most of the time when I talk to you guys out in the market and I talk to, boards and management teams, people are really afraid to do the last part. But I'll get fired if a whole bunch of people are spending money on stuff that doesn't return a profit to the business. But the danger is if you don't, those guys in the garage are going to turn up in a month's time and say, we played with this. We had to go with that idea. I think the point I want to make is that I think you've got to commit time to it and you've got to treat it with structure. It's not that you just let it out there and innovation magically happens. Innovation's a process and you need to work really hard at that. So, look, those were just some thoughts. We are delighted to have you as guests at Google. I think, we as a company and personally, just incredibly excited about what Kia's trying to do, trying to bring New Zealanders together, trying to create more of this innovation. I keep telling my boss, our president, that, we are quietly doing a stealth takeover of Google. There's about 7 Googlers in the room that are from New Zealand, and we'll introduce them to you later on. And hopefully one day, I just want to see more and more Kiwis going out and doing this kind of stuff. These networks are the way to do it. You won't build those ideas yourself. You won't do it by going out and knocking door to door. You have to engage the rest of the New Zealand community, and I think this is terrific. Thanks.